Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show, brought to you by Monmouth Park. It's closing weekend at Monmouth Park. Sunday is the $500,000 Now Stakes. This is for 2-year-olds going a mile on the turf. They're trying to attract some horses that may be going on to the Breeders' Cup. After this weekend, racing moves over to the Meadowlands for the next few weeks. Don't forget about the Win Early Pick 5. It's the last weekend you can get that at Monmouth Park. The earliest Pick 5 in the country. Post time's 12:15. I'm Ray Paulick. Pleased to be joined by our editor-in-chief, Natalie Voss, and by Jonathan Horowitz. Jonathan is the track announcer at Arapahoe Park in Colorado, but more importantly, what we're here to talk about today, he's been the announcer for the Thoroughbred Makeover since 2015 at the Kentucky Horse Park. And I believe he's going to be doing more than announcing this year. Is that right, Jonathan?
Actually, I'll just be announcing. My plan was to compete, but this year, because it's a mega makeover and I have much more broadcasting to do, I'll have to focus on that. But I have to say, of all the hats that I wear, I think my favorite is writing a column for Paulick Report, Horowitz On OTTBs, because off the track thoroughbreds have meant so much to me and really changed my life. And I really appreciate getting the chance to share stories about them, as Natalie does about her amazing baby too.
Well, I know that Natalie's got a lot of questions for you, but my first question for you is, are you kind of a late in life adaptee to riding and to OTTBs?
Yes. And that's made it harder to be able to learn how to ride, as opposed to our 8-year-old son, Chase, who says he's been riding since he got out of the womb. So I have been a horse race announcer since I was 14. And wow. Being an announcer, I'm up in the booth at Arapahoe Park right now. You are the one who describes the action, but you're separated from the action because you're so high up in the grandstand. So I wanted to get to know a little bit more about the horses, spend more time around them, get to know the trainers, the owners, the jockeys. And then I found out about retired racehorses. I mean, I'd always thought a 5-year-old horse was an old horse because they retired when they were 3 or 4. And then I came to learn that these horses that retire at a young age, almost like a professional football player that retires at 30, that there's so much more that they can do. And I went down to see retired racehorses that I had announced, and the trainer there, Ashley, she gave me the chance to ride one of them, which I thought was the coolest thing, to ride a horse that I've announced. And then afterward, I said I wanted to learn to take lessons and learn how to ride them. I thought it would make me a better broadcaster, but I was just also attracted to the horses. And I found out a few years later I was attracted to the trainer too, because we ended up getting married a few years later as well.
So part of this infatuation with riding horses had a human element to it too then.
Yeah, it's become a passion of mine. I appreciate that it's not easy to do. I appreciate that when you get it, it's one of the most rewarding feelings. It's a sport where, imagine if you're a basketball player, but the basketball had a mind of its own. And so, there are days where you have to consider the feelings of the horse, and there are days when my emotions come into it and the horse can sense that. And so it's being able to bond with the horses, become a team. And I love sports, and I'm also very competitive. And now I get to kind of play in a sport against a bunch of really good professionals in it too. So there's so much to it, which and I've enjoyed speaking to Natalie about it, because Natalie's in the same world that I am.
So this year's makeover is actually a 2-year competition, because last year's was canceled because of the coronavirus. How many horses are competing total?
It'll be several hundred. When entries came out, it was close to 1,000. And then when the preparation comes together, I think we're going to be in the neighborhood of about 500. But it's a unique makeover this year. It's a mega makeover, because it includes the class of 2020 that was postponed from last year because of COVID. And so because of that, we'll see a group of horses that have an additional year of retraining, and to see with that extra time of retraining how they've developed into their new careers. And then there's the class of 2021 where the trainers can't have started retraining their off the track thoroughbreds until the December prior. And it really is amazing to see in just about 10 or 11 months what these thoroughbreds are capable of doing. And I think it's very specific to the thoroughbred breed, their athleticism and their mind as well, for being able to pick up a completely different lifestyle and sport in such a short amount of time.
Well, Natalie, you're participating, correct?
I am. I will be taking my 4-year-old underscore to the 2021 class. We'll be doing dressage. There are a lot of different horse sports you can do at the makeover with your horse, and we're going to be in the dressage. And there's, I think, 93 other horse rider combinations in our competitive group. So we're not expecting anything super fancy as far as the results, but we're excited to be going.
Well, there's 10 disciplines, I understand, for this year's makeover, and this is not just to compete for ribbons, right? I mean, there's $100,000 in prizes.
Right. So there's the way that they do it is you compete within your sport. For dressage, we'll do 2 dressage tests, and then there'll be standings based on those combined scores. They'll take the top 5 people from each sport and have them compete again in a sort of final. And then they will choose the overall horse across all the various sports. The winners of each sport will be judged against each other, which is difficult to do because they're doing very different things. But they'll be judged against each other to decide who is the best example of a thoroughbred who has retrained in this limited amount of time for their particular purpose. And so the bulk of the prize goes to that one overall winner. And then there's some money dispersed to the top 5 in each discipline, in each horse sport as well.
And I should say this takes place at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington, Kentucky, October 12 to 17.
Yeah, it's coming up fast.
Yeah. What do you like about announcing it, Jonathan?
What I like is that it's actually more than just a competition. Yeah, the $100,000 and the reputation and the accolades are very significant, but this is more about the cause that it represents in terms of retired racehorses and putting the spotlight back on the thoroughbred sport horse, which it was for many years until the influx of warm bloods in the United States. So what I actually really appreciate is when a trainer comes in with a young thoroughbred who may be a little bit overwhelmed by the environment, maybe at a certain point in their training that they were hoping that they'd be further along, but they create a positive experience for the horse, and you see the horse walk out, and maybe they didn't have the best dressage test, or maybe they knocked over a few rails, but the horse and the rider walk out so proud that they're headed somewhere big. This is never the end goal because it's only the first year of retraining for these horses. It's a good end of first year goal. So I really appreciate that this represents more than just a competition. And it means a lot to me as someone who came at it first from the racing side, and now you have the racing and the aftercare sides coming together. But Natalie, I have to say, if you're showing up to the makeover with a horse with the barn name of Blueberry, which was the barn name of the great dressage horse Valegro, I think you're going to do a lot better than just on the name alone. I think you're going to do a lot better than you're giving yourself credit for.
Well, we can hope, but Jonathan, you mentioned the environment for these horses, and I think that's kind of the biggest reason that I and a lot of other people keep our expectations fairly low, because for the dressage in particular, we're showing in the Rolex Outdoor Stadium, which I don't even know how many seats that thing has, but it is an enormous sort of cavernous looking environment that these horses will never have been in before. So the thing about show horses, just as it is also true for race horses, you can put a ton of prep in, and then if your horse kind of falls apart in the paddock, so to speak, in racing speak, you would say, if they leave it all in the paddock because they get a little overwhelmed, that's just what it is. You just have to hope the horse handles the environment okay and can show off what they are capable of doing. But you kind of don't know until you get there whether you're going to demonstrate like this is the same as our best ride at home, or whether it's going to just sort of be, well, we're just going to try to stay on the horse and get through the test and be really proud about that. So I think everyone's kind of just looking forward to going in, completing what they came there for, and just being part of it. I know I am.
Oh yeah, and how cool is that to ride in the Rolex Stadium where, the Kentucky 3-day event gets held. And that's the other thing about the Thoroughbred Makeover. It puts amateur riders, like myself and like Natalie, the chance to ride in, the Madison Square Garden of equestrian arenas. So there's so much about it that makes it such a special competition. It's a great competition, but it also means more than just who finishes first or second or takes home the big prize money.
So with racehorses, you have some that like turf, have some that like dirt, some that go short, some that go long. When you get a retired horse, what goes into the thought process of saying, I want this horse to be in dressage or stadium jumping or something else?
Well, I've been very grateful in that I now live on a farm with my wife, Ashley, who's been a trainer for a couple of decades. And we're eventers, and that's the kind of triathlon of dressage, cross country, and show jumping. So automatically when a horse comes to our farm off the track, say from Arapahoe Park, or right now we have thoroughbreds that were bred in 6 different states on the farm, the first thing we're going to consider them for is, can they be eventers? But along the way in the training, they may take more to the flat work, or they may take more to the jumping. And Ashley treats it very much like a game, because these horses are young, where she was a psychology major with a focus in animal behavior. So she brings a lot of that into the retraining and just seeing how the horses respond. I have a 4-year-old off the track that I'm now working with, and he's a cool horse. He's got one eye and he loves to jump. So, you put a jump in front of him, he wants to jump it. So that tells us, what? He may be suitable for this. And then there are others that are afraid of going over ground poles. So then you kind of back off, and there's no, you get great advice on it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like parenting. There's no one way to do it. And Ashley likes to say, like, there may be 1 million wrong answers, but there's also like 1,000 right answers. And you just try and find that right answer. And at the end of the day, I think the litmus test is the horse happy and is the rider happy? And if you're happy, then you keep going. And then if things happen where you push them a little bit too far, maybe you take a step back. Natalie, what's your experience been with Blueberry, with Underscore, and you're the first person to really teach him all of these new things in the new life that he lives.
Yeah, so what I had done previously, I've done hunter jumpers and I did eventing with my big draft mare. I wasn't sure how much I wanted to continue to jump as a rider. And so I didn't really feel a need to push him at that early, because I wasn't sure how much I would want to do it. But what I have generally kind of found is that, like, most horses, as long as they're sound and not, completely insane, can do a very basic level of almost anything. It's a question of how good are they at that thing, and how far up through the levels can they advance doing that thing. I'm an amateur rider who likes to stay at the baby levels for the most part. So as long as the horse is sound and fairly reliable, fairly mentally sound, I'm not that concerned with him about, if I did want to pop over a few like little 2-foot 2.6 fences, he should be able to do that, even if he's not going to make, a professional show jumper and go over 3-foot courses someday. My expectations of whatever horse I have are fairly low, whatever sport we're doing. And most horses can do the low levels of things. They just may not be super talented at those things. In his case, I wanted to go for the dressage because that's what I felt comfortable I could build upon with the time that we had. We didn't start until late April. We were actually much later than a lot of other people headed to this competition. And I felt like you can put the pieces together to be able to walk, trot, canter, and a dressage test a little bit better than you can get a horse used to a bunch of different types of fences that you might see in show jumping or eventing. So with the time we had, that made the most sense to try. And then it turns out he's actually pretty good at this, because he's built in such a way that the way I'm asking him to move at this point in his dressage training is very easy for him. So he doesn't mind doing it, and he's happy doing it. And so he ends up making me look real smart, because he's a good little mover and he tries pretty well for the level that he's at. So he looks like he was really designed for this. But really, it's just kind of we fell into it. This is where we happened to start.
Keeping in mind that the vast majority of racehorses do not end up in a breeding program as stallions or broodmares, what is something, if you could tell a thoroughbred trainer, please do this, what is something that they can do with horses that are not going to be ending up in a breeding program? What is something a trainer can do to not necessarily prepare a horse for this kind of thing, but to help them along to have that second career?
That's a great question, and I'll be interested to hear what Natalie says to that as well. I know Natalie's written extensively about it for Paulick Report. I appreciate now that as I get to know more racehorse trainers, they're starting to think of these things, and it's that maybe the horse that you have isn't the most suitable for racing. Maybe because racing is tough. I mean, it's physically tough, but the other thing is the horse has to be willing to go through an opening maybe this wide on the rail at full speed with other horses around them. I mean, and so the horse that I have, his jockey club name was the Gray Man, and he now shows under Rocket Man. His barn name is Uno, but he was very content to go to the back of the pack and, hey, you guys go ahead. And he retired after 2 races, and it's because his racing connections realized, he may not be suitable for this, but he may be suitable for something different. And boy, is he suitable for eventing. I took him to his first recognized event in Utah, and we ran beginner novice and finished in the ribbons, and he made the jumping just look easy. And so that's the thing that I would tell the racing connections is just listen to your horse. And if they can't have racing be their main objective, then I know racing's built on hope, and maybe if you try blinkers or try turf or go long or go short, everything will magically change. But for most people that work with young racehorses, they can tell right away if the horse is going to have it on the track or they're not. And if they're not, they may actually be quite suitable for a different type of sport that could eventually go on to the Olympics, perhaps. Now, that's a lot to say for someone who's invested hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars into a horse. But I mean, it's all a gamble. And at the end of the day, just look out for the horse and see what you can do to keep the horse happy. Because if they're not going to cut it as a racehorse, they could very well cut it at a high level in another sport. That would be what I would say. But Natalie, what would be kind of your biggest advice to racing connections?
Well, so I would say 2 things. One of them sort of going off of your suggestion is recognizing when it's time to stop. And there are so many horses that could have benefited from somebody stopping a couple of starts sooner. Because, with a horse, you're not rushing to the breeding shed. Either you're going to retire it because you're going to retire it, or it's going to have an injury and then you have to retire it. So if you keep pushing on something that you already kind of know is not going to come together, you're increasing the chances that an injury is going to be the reason the horse retires. And then that leaves it with so many fewer options for a second career than what it might have had you stopped earlier when the horse was still more sound. The other thing that I think is important and doesn't really get talked about a ton is make sure that the people handling your horses every day are competent and kind. I've been very lucky with Blueberry because he's always had a very positive impression of people. Clearly, he expects every interaction he has with a person to be pleasant. And he's never had somebody really, chase him or scare him or hurt him. So he doesn't expect that from me. And that makes my job so much easier. I don't have to work around mental blocks that he might have developed on the track had he encountered someone who was a little rough or who didn't understand, the best way to try to teach him something. He didn't come to me with any of that baggage, which has made my life so much easier. And that's, that's something that's contributed, I think, to a negative reputation that off-track thoroughbreds have. They've been handled by a lot of different people. They've been tinkered with by a lot of different people through the years. And if they get someone who's a little bit too tough or who doesn't know what they're doing, then that causes problems for someone else down the line. Thoroughbreds are going through more hands than other breeds of horses are in the same number of years. So I think that Thoroughbreds have gotten a little bit of a bad rap for that reason. They've just had a bad experience somewhere along the way, just because they cycle through so many different hands. If you can be aware that the people riding them and handling them on the ground are approaching it, with an experienced perspective, you're going to make the job easier for the next person on the racetrack and the next person off the racetrack too.
When you do what Natalie said, then when a horse retires from racing, they're already steps ahead of other breeds because they've traveled from track to track. They've loaded on trailers. They've been around big crowds and a lot of different people. So when it's done right, they actually have a bit of a head start on if you get a warm blood or a quarter horse that you're trying to develop. So actually the racing can very much be a benefit as long as Natalie and I have said it's done with the right intentions and done the right way.
Yeah, it's been great with Blueberry. Because he's worked on a racetrack and he's used to galloping with other horses zooming around him, or he's used to jogging the wrong way while other horses are working. I take him to a busy warm-up ring at a horse show where a lot of horses kind of get a little bit, on edge. And he doesn't care. He blocks out what everybody else is doing because his whole life he's had to block out what everybody else is doing. And it's great because I'm sitting there kind of watching. There's always that one horse in a warm-up ring, who's like kind of about to lose it. And I'm always watching for that horse like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care at all. He's just like, let him do whatever. I'm in my box. I'm cool. And I think that's from the racetrack. I think that's because that's what he learned to do from a young age. And it's so nice. I haven't quite got used to it yet. I'm still the one kind of looking around like, okay. He's just like, oh, just shut up and ride me. It's fine.
That's so cool.
Well, thanks, Jonathan, for your ongoing contributions to the Paulick Report with your off-track thoroughbred stories and videos. And Natalie, I wish you the best in the Thoroughbred Makeover coming up next month. And now, can people, obviously, it's in a big arena. Anybody can attend?
Attend, watch on the live stream, support your friends, find that racehorse that was in the Breeders' Cup that is now doing something a little bit different. There are so many stories that are a part of it, and I think Natalie and Blueberry are going to be big ones this year.
Well, I would think that the owners of these horses, for the most part, that had them as racehorses, bought them with great hopes that they were going to do something big on the racetrack, they've got to have some pride to see them moving on to the second career. Like I said, for the most part, they may have lost money on the horse, but to see an animal that they bought with the intention of racing, not do so well on the track, and then do well in another discipline, that's got to be kind of heartwarming.
Oh, they do. I mean, I keep in touch with the first horse that I ever got was one that I announced in Colorado. Actually, I'm wearing a sweater with her racing silks on it, and I keep in touch with the racing connections, and they love getting videos and pictures, and obviously never expected that the horse would be such a great jumper. So that's another part of it, is seeing the racing side now come over and really appreciate these horses' accomplishments that are taking place now across something that they never would have expected.
Absolutely. And I think the makeover sends little cards, I believe, to breeders, I think maybe a former owner sometimes, to some of the racing connections when a horse that they were connected with is entered in the makeover and just says, hey, this horse is in for this. These are the dates of the event if you'd like to come. And I know a lot of them do. So that's always great to see.
Well, the whole concept of thoroughbred aftercare has just come so far in the 30 plus years that I've been here in Kentucky, and the two of you have got a lot to do with that. There's still a lot of work to do in terms of funding and support from the industry, but there's been a lot of progress, and it's great to see.
Absolutely. It means a lot to hear, and to play a part in it is incredibly rewarding.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks again to both of you, and Joe Nevels will be here to talk a little bit about this week's Woodbine Star of the Week after this.
Set piece is still well back. Now they're coming. Avies flatter after Town Cruise with Duke of Hazard, and right down the outside, Ryder Comet. Olympic run of the center. Set piece is getting to work now. The leader remains Town Cruise. Town Cruise on the inside in front. A cavalry charge down the outside. Space Traveler and Rider Comet and Raging Bull. But Daisuke Fukumoto stole this year's Rico Woodbine Mile with Town Cruise. 2.5 lengths to Space Traveler. Behind them, March the Arch and Raging Bull the outside. And the time is 1:35.14.
With the shortest trip you could take around the track, our Woodbine star of the week is Town Cruise, who led every step of the way to win the Woodbine Mile on September 18th. Now, this is a real success story, an Ontario-bred, owned, trained, and bred by Brandon Greer, who's run exclusively at Woodbine and steadily climbed the ranks to win one of the track's signature races. You just love to see it.
I think this was his 8th start of the year, Brandon Cruz, as a trainer, and believe that his most active year as a trainer was something like 27 starts. To win a race like that with that little activity, he's got 2 horses in training this year based on Equibase. It's just phenomenal that in his second stake start that he could beat this kind of a field and get the Grade 1 win.
Now, harkening back to last week's episode of the Friday show with Jennifer Morrison of Canadian Thoroughbred, she mentioned that the inside path was going to be fresh once they took the temporary rail off for the big races. And she nailed that one. This horse took advantage of every opportunity that was afforded by an open rail and got to that lead early, got all the, staved off a little cavalry charge at the end, but never really seemed that threatened in this race. It really seemed like having that fresh ground really played to Town Cruise's advantage.
Well, I hope Jennifer was among those people who crushed that horse at the last minute. He went from over 20-1 to 8-1, and still, 8-1 is still a nice payoff in the Woodbine Mile. And this is a win and you're in. The horse was not nominated to the program, can be nominated now, but I think they're going to let the horse tell them whether or not they're going to go on to the Breeders' Cup Mile, and that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And would be, as I mentioned, would be the first time running away from Woodbine, so it'd be a whole new experience for him.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Friday Show. Thanks to Monmouth Park for their sponsorship of the show throughout the year. This is closing weekend at Monmouth Park. And thanks again to Woodbine for their sponsorship of Star of the Week. We will see you next week.